Hello, we're back. I'm surprised that you're all still here. Congratulations, I'm very happy that you are. So, my name is Norm Blanchard. Obviously, you've heard my name a few times today. And I'm so glad that, I was just saying to someone that everything that we've spoken about today, everything from Xian Xiao and Samantha Winemaker's presentation this morning, to the panel discussion, to what I'm going to present to you now on dignity, they go hand in hand. And this is the last presentation of the day. And the funny part about it is that when we were organizing this thing last year, they put me on the last presentation too. And I thought, well, what's that all about? But Julie said it's because you can keep people awake. So here it goes. So what I'm going to speak to you about today is an approach to healthcare. Now, the information I'm going to give you today is taken from a book called Dignity in Care. This is applied to, obviously this book was written with healthcare in mind, but I believe that it goes much further than that. So I see people here who are in pastoral care, and I so believe that this applies to pastoral care as well. I so believe that this applies to caring for an elderly parent, an elderly loved one, or just a loved one who's ill. You don't even have to be elderly, really. Elderly doesn't have to necessarily be part of that equation. I think dealing with people requires dignity. And I think dignity is one of the foundations of everything that we do, or should be one of the foundations of everything we do in healthcare. So, if I were to ask you the question, I'm trying to find the button to next page. Okay, there we go. What do you think are the most common fears of someone who is at end of life, or someone who has been diagnosed as with a life-limiting illness, or someone who was diagnosed with an illness, period, that could possibly end in death? If I were to ask you, what do you think those people's common fears would be? What would you answer to that? Now I'm going to ask you to just shout it out, and I'll repeat it in the mic so that everyone can hear it. Suffering. Pain management. Being forgotten or being remembered. Yeah, or people not remembering. That's a very good one too. Leaving your loved ones. Being alone. I'm sorry? Loss of control. Dependency. Yeah, sorry, I didn't hear that one, sorry. Unfinished business. Okay. So all of those are very much part of, and then there are another 100, right? We all know that there are many common fears. I would like to speak of the most common, according to my experience at hospice. So my job at hospice is talking to people, right? We have these conversations, existential questions. Some of you will relate to that kind of thing. Some of us have those relationships with our loved ones, some less. But having those conversations are really important, is really important. So some of the common fears, the process of dying is one of them. What's going to happen to me? I don't know how many times I've heard people say, I'm not afraid of dying. And what comes after that? It's what comes before, right? I'm not afraid of dying. It's what happens before I die that I'm afraid of. The unknown. One of the, so those of you who were here last year, we did an exercise on loss at end of life, or loss with a limiting illness. One day I'm walking, the next day I'm not. And the biggest part of that is not knowing what comes next. If you remember, every time I spoke last year during the exercise, I would say, pay attention to not knowing what comes next. And people with limiting illnesses, that's a huge fear. And that is very destabilizing. Loss of control, someone said that. A loss of loved ones, someone said that as well. Isolation, you said that just now, being alone, right? That life was meaningless. Wow, what was this life all about? How many of you have heard their loved ones say that as they were dying? Yeah. Those are conversations that are hard to listen to and hard to accompany, but they need to be heard, right? Listening. Others' reactions. That's one that, I never heard of that one, right? I'm afraid of what other people are going to think of me when they come and visit me at the hospice in this state, having lost so much weight, maybe, or having whatever. It could be the way I look, it could be the way I am speaking, it could be many, many things. But worrying about how other people think or other people's reactions to our circumstance is part of the common fears. The two that I want to address today are abandonment and legacy. And I want to explain to you what I mean by abandonment. So abandonment is not your regular, people are going to bring me at the hospice and they're not going to come and visit me, or I won't have any visitors. It's not that kind of abandonment that I'm speaking of. I'm speaking of the type of abandonment where you have conversations in the person's room with the resident in the bed, but you and someone else are having conversations in regards to the treatment, and they're quite capable of being part of that conversation, but we're not including them in that conversation. So Sien Xiao and Samantha spoke of that this morning, of including everyone in that communication. So that's the kind of abandonment that I'm speaking of. And then the other one is legacy. Someone over there said, being remembered. How are we remembered? Our name. What else? Our accomplishments. Sorry? Achievements. Personality traits. Do you hear the commonalities there? So it's not about material. It's about who you are. That's what legacy is. And today we're going to talk about exactly that. There's this thing called the dignity approach. So what is dignity? Well, Merriam-Webster Dictionary, the quality or state of being worthy, honored, or esteemed. That means including people in conversations. Valuable and worthy of respect. Another dictionary explains it as the quality of being worthy of honor and respect. So the commonalities there: respect, honor, worthiness. The dignity approach is something that a Canadian doctor, right? Canadian doctor from the Palliative Care Research Unit in Manitoba. His name was Dr. Harvey Chichinov. Dr. Harvey Chichinov is a lot of what Sien and Samantha's research is based on. Dignity, treating people with dignity. They've done a ton of research on that, and the results of that research proved that treating people with dignity affects the physical results of an illness and improves quality of life. What's happening here? A red Honda CWN X124. Please move your vehicle. A red Honda. There you go. Okay, back to dignity. So Dr. Chichinov and his team have done extensive research on the power of dignity. So they wrote a book called Dignity in Care. And in that book, I really suggest that you purchase that book, because in that book, there are many parts of that book, the information in that book that will help us to guide us in that type of care and introducing and implementing that type of care, and not only in our organizations but personally. So it brings solutions to the practical tools to promote a culture and compassion of respect to the healthcare system. What are the principles? Well, there they are, right? So the principles of dignity is to recognize and to look at and to treat the individual. It's very holistic. Have you ever been in a situation of needing support, and the person or the people providing your support overlooked that you were a person? You need to do this. You need to do that, instead of asking the questions that Sienna and Samantha were speaking of this morning. How did that make you feel? What are the feelings that come out of that? So, dignity relieves pain. Dignity can affect us physically, calms our individual fears and anxieties. There's so much that dignity can help us with. The ABCD of dignity, just an acronym that can help us. Attitude, right? Our attitude toward and our attitude in regards to our interactions. Benevolence, wanting to do good. That's part of it as well. Compassion. Lack of compassion in our care cancels out the care. As soon as we lack compassion, and that could be in pastoral care, health care, our interactions with each other at work, our interactions with our residents, with our patients, with each other, as soon as the compassion is gone, then the communication breaks down. And then dialogue. And by what I mean by dialogue is honest dialogue, transparency. You know, we spoke this morning about transparency. It's so important to be in the know. Right? In the dark is lack of transparency. Being in the know is knowing. So, when you're interacting with someone, and when you're really mindful of dignity, of the dignity of the other person, there is a question that Dr. Chichinov came up with that really sets the tone right from the get-go of that interaction. And the question is this: what do I need to know about you as a person to give you the best care possible? What do I need to know about you as a person to give you the best care possible? Where could you use that in your life? Shout it out. The question can be changed a bit. Could be, as a friend, Christine, what do I need to know about you that will enhance our relationship and our friendship? As a pastoral care person, what do I need to know about your spirituality that will help me provide you with the best spiritual care possible? Yes. Sorry? Values, right? Getting to know the values of the person. That's really important. Yeah. Anything else? Any other ideas where you could apply this question in your roles in life? It doesn't have to be professional roles. It could be your everyday family role. Yes. Okay. Right. Okay. Very good. So I don't like to be touched. That's pretty important. Yeah, for me to provide you with the care that you need, right? And I'm a hugger, so I get that. That's an important question, right? I need to know that. Not that I would hug somebody without them, without permission, but that's something that if I asked that question, that would come out, wouldn't it? Very good. Anything else? When do you want me to step in? Okay. Question over here? Yes. Where would you apply this question in your... Okay, your societal views and your beliefs, right? Yeah. Yes, Miss Gennard. Yeah. Right. Sharing past experiences. Yes, absolutely. So this question is key then to starting the process and to really helping you as an intervener, as a person who provides the intervention, to provide a mindful or an intervention that will be mindful of dignity. So if you notice that I kind of asked that question in different ways, given the different circumstances that we might be living in. So not everyone needs to ask the question aloud, but if you're thinking it, you're going to approach your conversation with that person with that in mind. So that's key. The intent is to give caregivers or the person who's intervening to get that person thinking about, right? Thinking about that person as a human being and not just another patient. It helps us to, if we're using this professionally, to make the person the center of the conversation or the interaction and not only the illness or the symptoms. Not only the issues. So looking at the person and getting to know the person. Some answers that I've heard is people presume to know my needs without discussing them with me. Have you ever heard that? Mm-hmm. Have you ever experienced that? Yeah. Right? I think some people might not think that I'm smart enough or important enough to get the answer to my questions. Yeah, what made them come to think about that? Or, what do you need to tell me about you? I'm afraid of dying alone. That's pretty important, isn't it? Right? So you get some really deep answers to that question, and I think that's where they went with this. Other important questions might be, at this stage of your life, what is most important to you? Let me hear some answers on that. At this stage in your life, people, what is most important to you? Dave? What's most, yeah. Maintaining as much independence as possible. That's a great question too, and that's a good answer, absolutely. Somebody said something over here. Giving back, is that what you said? Okay, giving back. No one else? Family. Sorry? Your family's well-being. Health. What concerns you the most in your life right now? Oh my, okay, Donald Trump. We won't get into that one. Yeah, for you that's a big concern, okay. There might be one or two other people in the hall that are concerned about politics in our world today. So what concerns you the most right now in your life? Loss of control. That's a big one. Staying healthy. Being a burden. That's a huge one. We hear that a lot at the hospice. Not being able to do the things that you used to do, the losses and the secondary losses and the tertiary losses, right? The illness stops me from, let's say, walking today. And if I don't walk, I can't make it to the dining room on my own. I have to depend on someone else. And if I'm too proud to ask for, so there's all these losses. If I'm too proud to ask for help, then I might miss a meal because of it. Who knows, right? So all these losses that occur because of the illness, absolutely. Right? So these are some examples of some of the questions that we can prompt. And I'm going to give you have in your bags some information that I want to connect all of this to what you have in your bags in just a moment. So patient dignity, right? There's two things that we do sometimes at the hospital. We don't always do it for every resident, but we use a thing called a legacy document, which is produced by using a therapy called dignity therapy. So dignity therapy is a wonderful tool that is used to help the person realize just how important their life is. So what we like to do at the hospice is before we actually do the therapy, we use a questionnaire called, and this is all in Chachanov's book, just so that you know, the Patient Dignity Inventory. PDI is what we call that. So it's a set of questions, questionnaire, that they're simple questions, and there are 25 of them. Now, you don't have to use the 25, but then you respond to those questions on a scale of 1 to 5. 1 being really bad, or really good rather, and 5 being really bad. So, for instance, here are some examples of those 25 questions, and you have those all in your bag, so you don't need to write them down. So, I'm not able to accomplish my daily tasks. Okay, so if that's the case, how much does that affect you on a 1 to 5? And the 1 might be, it doesn't affect me at all, and 5 might be, it affects me a lot. I ruminate about that all day. I feel depressed. So then what we would do is go through those 25 questions, and the questions that have 5s or 4s and 5s, we will do the dignity therapy with the questions. There are 10 questions for the dignity therapy. You don't ask all 10 questions because they're pretty deep questions. And the idea is to choose questions that will address those issues. And at the end, we produce a document for the person. And the document is called the legacy document. So the legacy document speaks of the things that are important for that person. And so we record, I'll speak about how that's done, how the therapy is done in a moment, and then we're going to do one with you. There's a questionnaire in your bag that we're actually going to do an exercise to get you started on your own legacy document. So then we interview the person, we ask 3 questions, let's say, and we record the conversation. And then we transcribe that conversation word for word into a legacy document. That document then is given back. Of course, it's edited by the resident or the person in question, and we make the changes, and then we give that to the person, and they will give that to their loved ones as a document to remember them by. And we'll see about what is in that document in a few moments. So that's the dignity approach. Dignity therapy, we use the DPI to evaluate where the issues are, and then we create that document afterwards. So the therapy guides an individual in the creation of a heritage document or legacy document. So that's really what that's all about. And there are many, many advantages to this. The advantages aren't only to the resident's benefit, but to the family or the loved one's benefits as well. So the resident will know, someone said a while ago, being remembered is important. Well, I want to be remembered after I die too, I think. You know, the things that I've done. And most of you want to be remembered as well. Being forgotten is one of the most common fears of a dying person. How are my grandchildren going to remember me? Well, if I have a document to give my children, they can give that document to my grandchildren. Even if they don't know me, they'll get to know me a little bit anyway. So this dignity therapy and this legacy document is very valuable for that. So it addresses the needs, the need to feel that life has meaning and life has purpose. If I were to ask you what your purpose is right now, can you answer that question right now? It's a hard question to answer, isn't it? If I were to ask you right now, what is your purpose in life? You don't need to answer that, but it's a hard thought for some. You know, doing good is a good answer. And it's a very basic answer, but everyone wants to do good. Everyone wants to create good. Everyone wants to, as my friend says, shed light. Right? What is your purpose in life? This heritage document, this legacy documents, helps the person to kind of see their life in that light. The process is relatively brief, right? And can be done at the bedside if it comes to that. The process takes about 3 hours with the person at the very most, depending, of course, on their limitations and so on. Does it have to be done at end of life? The answer to that is no. You can start that document today, and we are going to do that in a few moments. But it requires us to go to places that are sometimes difficult to go to, right? Leaving legacy. Places, no, we won't do that. Enhances the process itself, right? Can be done at the bedside, and places less weight on, and I said that a while ago, interpretation, insight, and working through, and more emphasis on facts, putting forward the facts, being transparent about self. So creating the document, 2 or 3 meetings at the very most. Now, it takes more than that time. It takes more than 2 or 3 hours because you have to transcribe the recording, and that's what takes long with this. And, you know, we had started it at the hospice a while back, but then there was, you know, only 2 people working in that department, so we couldn't use, sometimes it would take up to 6-7 hours to transcribe a document. This is something that could be managed now. So a duration of 30 to 60 minutes per meeting, depending on the client's tolerance. A series of questions are asked. The practitioner must listen with empathy and ask those questions that we're going to look at in a moment to prompt the conversation. The meetings are recorded, as I mentioned, and then they're transcribed, they're reviewed by the resident, and then and the final copy then is presented to that person. Now, sometimes the resident will ask that we provide the document to their family members after their death. That's something that is done as well. But then we have consent, and we have to have written consent by the person to do that. So this is how the intervention plan works. The first meeting, we introduce the concept. When we have done the DPI, the Patient Dignity Inventory, the PDI, we sit down with the person and start talking about those number 5s on that list. What are the things that they find the most difficult? Introduce the concept. Answer any questions in regards to the concept itself. Provide a copy of the questions, the dignity therapy questions. And sometimes we can choose with them. They would choose, obviously, but explain to them what those questions mean. And then they would choose 2 or 3, maybe to 4 questions. And then we would create the therapy from those 4 questions. Then the third meeting, we sign a document of consent. If they want to go through with it, we have to have consent, written consent for that. And we present the first draft. After writing the consent, we carry out the therapy, which is the conversation itself. And then the fourth meeting, we present them with the draft document and then make the corrections and then go back the last time, present them with the document and take orders from them, for them to let us know what they want us to do with that particular document. Who do they want us to give it to, and so on, if that's the case. So here's some stats. The therapy was useful. 86% of people found that the therapy was useful. The therapy, they were very satisfied or satisfied, 91%. The therapy has improved their feeling of dignity. This is an important question, 76%. Left an impression that this process will help their family members, and that's important for many people who are at end of life. I want my family members to be okay. Advantages for the patient's family. Has helped the family overall, 95%. This family would recommend this to others, 95%. And they feel that it had improved the dignity of their loved one, 78%. So the stats prove it, right? The stats prove the worthiness of this therapy. Some of the obstacles at end of life is, of course, physical distress, cognition of affectation, limited time. At end of life, there's a certain specific time. Interruptions during the therapy sessions. It's very important that when you go into this kind of therapy with someone that the rest of the staff know not to disturb you. Very, very important. In the dark versus in the know. In your bags, you have this document called Dignity, a Life-Giving Approach. Can you take that out just for a moment, please? You also have a pen and a document that looks like this. There are 3 questions on that document. Dignity therapy questions. Now, I'm going to bring you through, this is not exactly like what we do at the hospice because we only have a few minutes, really. What time is it now? So we have about a half hour. So this takes a lot longer than a half hour. That's why we limited it to 3 questions. And I limited the number of lines as well for you to write. So I'd like you to look at the patient dignity inventory. But I'd like you to apply it to your life right now. Not as a patient necessarily, but as an individual. How many of these questions relate to you, and how many of these questions affect you? So just put a little line beside the questions that really relate to you, and on a scale of 1 to 5, how much do they affect you? 1 being really good, not a problem at all, and number 5, an overwhelming problem. So I'm going to give you 5 minutes to go over those questions. And just put a little line beside, a little tick beside. So those questions that may affect your life or may be relevant to your life at the moment, those that you've given an evaluation, how many of you have a 5 beside one of those questions or those statements? Okay. How many of you have a 4 beside some? Let me see some hands. If you're okay, quite a few. How many of you have a 3 beside some of those questions? Okay. So, with those questions in mind, so that is what we call the DPI. Now, the DPI is done more in depth, of course, than what we've just done now. But we'd have a conversation about those statements. Let's say one of them was, I'm worried about the future. I'm worried about the future. Yeah. I would give that a 3. Right? So we would talk about those issues that have high marks, 4s and 5s, and then we would go into the 3s after that. We'd have in-depth conversations about that. And then from that, we would choose the questions at the back, which are the dignity therapy questions. And those are the questions that we would base the interview on. Now, for the sake of this exercise, I've pre-chosen the 3 questions that I thought would be relevant to all of our lives. The first question is, are there specific things you would like your family to know about you? And are there particular things you would want them to remember about you? So I'm going to ask you to respond to that just by writing something down in the space below that. The second question is, what are your most important accomplishments and what do you feel most proud of? Can you see how that's relevant to legacy here in your life, to other people? So if you could answer some of that question, that would be great. And the last question is, what have you learned about life that you would want to pass along to others? What advice or guidance would you wish to pass along to your family and friends? Okay, so take 5-10 minutes to answer. Let's do a 10-minute run here. We'll give you 10 minutes to answer those questions, and then we'll look at them together afterwards. So go ahead. We've written about as much as we can at this point. I know it's late in the day, my friends. This is a heavy line of thinking for this time of day. I get it. But this is just to help and to give you an idea what dignity therapy is and the benefits of what that could do. Can I ask you a question in regards to what did these 3 questions bring you to realize? What did these 3 questions bring you to realize about yourself? Yes, can shout it out. Okay, so the importance of asking questions that we wouldn't think of asking, yeah. And the questions that are on this particular sheet are questions that we wouldn't think of asking, right? But the information that you're going to get from these questions is going to be some pretty deep information relating to the person. Good answer, thank you. Anyone else? Shout it out. I want this to be the basis of my obituary. There you go, okay. Right? So that's pretty important what you just said there. Why do you want that to be a basis of your obituary? Can I ask you? Yeah. Right. And you want to shout that out to the world because that's how you want to be remembered. Okay, very good, thank you. The second question made me think about making every day count. Wow. Okay. What are your most important accomplishments and what do you feel most proud of? I think it's been hammered into our minds that pride is not a good thing. But being proud is. Being proud is an awareness of an accomplishment. It's an awareness of the good that we're doing. So good point, Catherine. Thank you for that. Yes, Joanne? In life, we can always make changes, and it's up to us to make those changes. And by asking ourselves these questions, and there are 10 of them, these are only 3 questions. By asking ourselves those questions, it gives us an opportunity and a perspective on how we can change the things that we don't like. Good point, Joanne. Thank you. Yes? That's a big one, right? And these are all responses that we get from people, right? That I haven't given myself enough credit for the things that I've done in my life. Good point. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and how much energy. So, this lady, what's your name? Sorry. Yeah. Dolores said, it's not about the material stuff in our life. These questions have made her think about the things that she's done and how she raised her children and these other things that make us who we are. And really, that's what we die with. My father said this to me at a very young age. Someone was talking to me, Sian was talking to me today about, outliving his mother. And we've outlived our parents at home, all of us, when we turned 60. So my father said to us at a very young age, you only die with one thing, your name. And when people say Mary Donato, what are they going to think? When they say Norm Blanchard, what are they going to think? When they say David Stamp, what are they going to think? So we die with our person and the things that we've done, right? And sometimes we have to be aware of that to be able to make the changes of the things that we're not too. And we have to be aware of the things that we did do. And a lot of times, being aware of some of this stuff would be enough to provide the peace that we need to let go at end of life. Most people who have agitation, there's a lot of reasons for agitation, and I'm not a doctor, but a lot of things that cause agitation are thoughts. How many of you doing pastoral care and supportive care and psychology and social work know that? right? What makes us depressed? You know, it could be chemical depression, absolutely, but a lot of it is thoughts, right? Triggers cause thoughts, thoughts cause feelings, and feelings cause reactions. So these kinds of questions help to put perspective on people's lives. Anyone else want to say something about these questions? Yes. Okay. Oh, good. So that's a good thing about this exercise and doing it today, isn't it? Because you're not at end of life and you're not there in life, but you are writing this as if, and this I'm just paraphrasing what's your first name? What Lindsay just said. Yes, Lindsay, you're at Serenity. Sorry. What Lindsay just said is that she kind of catapulted herself into the future, and it made her think of her present life, and that she's career driven and maybe not kind of providing or enough time to her children. But asking yourself these questions and providing answers to these questions, Lindsay, is giving you an opportunity to alter that, doesn't it? Being at end of life, having those thoughts could provide, agitation, or could provide difficult thoughts. But now having it now, it's giving you the opportunity to make some changes, perhaps, that will benefit you at end of life. So good point. Anyone else? Yes. What's your first name first? Wendy. Okay, Wendy. Yeah. Yeah. So we're hard on ourselves, right? So this for you today, this exercise, and again, the 10 questions that the dignity therapy, we're talking dignity here right now. There are 10 questions to ask yourself. 3 questions have evoked all of these thoughts. That, yeah, I did okay. And this is from your exercise today. And you're saying that you would use this with your parents at one point to help them to think that they did okay. Awesome thought. Anyone else want to share it? Yes, Mary. Shout it out, Mary. I always ask her, Mary's an alto in my choir, and I always ask her to sing louder, so I'm going to ask you to shout this too. But you see, you can talk louder, I'm noticing. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Good point, Mary. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that. I don't know why it's called dignity therapy. I'm assuming, I'm making an assumption here, that this research was done in the medical healthcare field. So, I'm assuming that's why the word therapy is attached to it. But I kind of agree with you, and that's why I have to say, Mary, good point. That's why I'm applying it to this gathering today. You know, the word therapy is there, but what we're doing right now is having a discussion. Is it therapy? Is it therapeutic? Yeah, I guess it could be. But the point that I'm trying to make with this exercise is that you don't have to wait for it to be therapy to use it. So thank you for that. That's a very good point. And the point that I'm making by using this today is that, yeah, asking ourselves these questions doesn't necessarily have to be therapy. It's just they're just good questions to ask yourself to give a bit of a perspective on your life, of where your life is right now, and that's really what it's done. Is there anyone else that wants to share something that they got out of this particular exercise? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so some people will use that. Some people would feel that that's not healthy for grieving. There's a whole concept, and we could be here for another day talking about this. Good idea if it works for the family, but with the process of grief, there's moving forward through grief, and some people feel that, people will, for instance, keep a recording on the phone of their deceased relative for years. And what happens in the moment that they listen to that, and this is just one thought on this, right? There are many. That recording, listening to that recording will bring them back into the area in their grief that they've already moved forward from. So there's that lack of separation. And if you studied, as Dave would tell you, as Dave, the funeral director, would tell you, when we study grief, there's a movement forward in grief. And the most crucial part of the funeral process is the physical separation of, now, the relationship never ends, but the physical separation is needed for us to go on with the spiritual relationship with our dead loved one. And somehow, things like that, Lindsay, could impede that process. So that's a very short way of explaining psychology of grief, which is a 4-month course. Okay, just thank you. Any more comments on that exercise? So I really encourage you, highly encourage you, to take a look at the rest of those questions. Look at the questions that this brought up, just these 3 questions. Look at the things that it brought up in your own life. These questions were researched, and these questions were created to provide perspective on a dying person's life. But I think it would be quite helpful, as you saw today, for us to ruminate these questions and take a look at where we're at in life. It's a really good way to find some perspective on our life where it stands today. And if we're not happy with some of those things, that these questions and the answers to these questions that we provide could provide us with some perspective on making changes in our life that would make it a better life to live. Thank you so much for listening. This is, for some of you, this must have been painful. At the last presentation of the day is always the most difficult. And because we have chili and we have desserts and we have all kinds of stuff in our body that tell us to go to sleep instead of listening to a workshop. So thank you so much for your endurance. And I'm not sure what's next. I think this is it, eh? Suzette, are you going to come up and present something? Okay, so Julie's going to come around and we're going to do the draw. So thank you very much, and we'll see you hopefully next year. So if you want to just wait a little bit, Julie will come in and do that draw for you.